Hi, our dear listeners. We are very happy to be on another episode of our podcast, Pochopit lidi, which in English is making sense of people. And we are very proud to have here today with us Gordon Neufeld himself.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Xenia, maybe you want to, maybe someone doesn't know who Gordon Neufeld is, which is
Yeah.
almost impossible, but.
Okay, in case you don't know him, Gordon Neufeld is a Canadian psychologist who has more than 50 years of experience with kids and adults who take care of kids and who developed a very beautiful theory, um, attachment-based developmental theory that will be the main topic of our today's meeting. We decided that um, this will be not the ordinary one parenting podcast, but we want it to be interesting also for parents and professionals, and that we want to explore the beginning of and the start and the um, uh, your ways of thinking maybe around the theory. So be ready for some tricky questions.
Okay, so should we begin? Gordon, could you please, first of all, tell us how did you come to develop attachment-based developmental theory? With what experiences or observations first led you in this direction?
Well, that's a great question, Lena. Um, the let me first explain what theory means and in science, because it has two meanings, and that's very confusing for people. One meaning is that it's a hypothesis. It's something that's untested. And so do you have a theory about something would be like, do you have an opinion about something? Do you have an idea about something? Then there's another way that theory is used, and this came from the natural sciences, which is my background in physics and chemistry. That's my background as a natural science. In there, a theory is a very special thing. It's a model, and it's a model about how things will work. Now the problem in psychology is that everything that is important is unseen. And so because it's unseen, it's invisible, uh, then then we're used to dealing with it in physics, because in physics uh, it's assumed that the relationship is the most significant part between a particle, electron, a proton. It's the relationship that defines everything. Nothing is outside of relationship. And because it's invisible, then you have to have a model about what that is. Gravity is uh, is one of the most beautiful theories. Of course, the latest theories are string theory and quantum theory and so on. And so it's a model, and a model is basically used to explain, first of all, phenomena that can't otherwise be explained. And so it's evaluated on its power to explain, on its power to predict. So you have to be able to predict and generate hypotheses that are testable in the absence of conflicting evidence. Now, I was very, very much caught up. I mean, the other parent of psychology that most people will know is philosophy. And I had a great leaning towards philosophy, and there your fundamental assumptions are important. And I was trained as a behaviorist, a radical behaviorist. And by radical, it means that you do not have to make inference to anything inside the organism, because your thesis in your model is that all behavior is instrumental and it's controlled by its consequences. So that's the basic thesis of learning theory. That's a blank slate theory in operation. That's John Locke going back 400 years, bring forward to operation in logical positivism, it's called. It is that all behavior is instrumental and controlled by its consequences. Well, that really appealed to me because it was incredibly simple. It was incredibly elegant. And I was a new father, and it just seemed like, oh, that made so much sense. That you could do this, is you can control all behavior by its consequences. Well, my first role was working in prison with very violent, first of all, young adults, and then adolescents. And my model, the model of learning theory, had no explanation for aggression or violence. And these individuals had been consequenced so much, and their violence grew with the amount that they were consequenced, that they were trying to be controlled. And at the same time, I had two young girls, 3 and 1 years of age at that time, and it made no sense of them because you could not control their behavior. It seemed that there was something inside that was driving emotion. And so that was driving an instinct that was driving behavior. Now that goes totally against all learning theory. Totally against it. So it couldn't explain the phenomena that I was observing. And then it didn't explain racism. It didn't explain a lot of the things that were happening at that time. It couldn't explain the Vietnam War. It couldn't explain anything that was going on at that time. And so the philosopher part of me said, wait a minute. There is something drastically wrong with this theory. And I joined the ranks of Carl Rogers and Maslow, whose children converted them out of behaviorism. And so that's how they were, because I can't explain my child through this theory. I can't explain the phenomena. I can't explain what happens when they wake up. I can't explain anything. So when that happens, you go back to, well, what did John Locke throw out? Well, he threw out the main drivers of instinct and emotion, that which moves us. And then it goes like, oh my goodness, we got to go back to a model that says there's something spontaneous moving us, that life, that if you're alive, it means that something moves you. Now, and so you have to go to the inside, and you have to, if it's instinct, and if creatures are creatures of relationship, and we take our identity, like every particle in the universe, from its relationship with each other, as soon as a nerve is no longer in connection with another nerve, it loses its life, its identity, and so on. Everything is in terms of in relationship. We have eclipsed the main things that explain human behavior. So that's when I got converted. First of all, well, the attachment and development kind of go along with each other, but development is one aspect of each other. Developmental theory is that that uh, that the unfolding of human potential is absolutely spontaneous if conditions are conducive. It's like you go back to the gardener, right? Is that we can't cause growth. We can't cause the unfolding of potential. All we are is midwives. Well, that's totally different, because as a learning theorist, you are operating on things. You are changing them from the outside in, right? But from this point of view, you are working in concert with nature. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's a personification of the life force, that it's spontaneous. And so the idea of spontaneity, that it's spontaneous if conditions are conducive. And then your primary purpose, your life purpose for me as a philosopher or scientist, comes to understand what those conditions are. Well, then there was a second part of it that just really hit in the 1950s. It began to hit as a consciousness again, uh, that it wasn't coming from natural science. For me, it was natural for natural science, but that we are relational creatures and our identity comes from there. So we have to have a model that looks at the conditions that are conducive in relationship, which lead to the spontaneous unfolding of potential. There's the attachment-based developmental approach. And and I find myself, I was so fortunate to come from philosophy and physics and chemistry, because those are the queen science from which psychology was derived. But most other psychologists didn't come from the parent sciences, and so they didn't understand how important the philosophy was and the assumption that you have and that you come to. And so then, oh my goodness, I turned my attention to aggression. And that's where my first specific model came out, which now I refer to as the traffic circle model of frustration. And it explained so clearly all of the violence and aggression, from the headbanging of the infant to the atrocities, the murderous wishes of the kids I was dealing with. And so then I that's the fruition, because the power to predict, it was able to predict that, oh my goodness, there is something that isn't happening. And this is where Carl Jung really was absolutely astute. He said any model, or basically, and I'm paraphrasing him, any model that's really going to work will have to be alchemical. That is, that you will see that the story isn't in what you see. The story is in what you don't see. And that is part of the philosophy that goes way, way back, thousands of years, in fact, is that what tells the story is what isn't there. And that's what Carl Jung said. It's it's the lack of warmth that a child experiences that tells the story about their unfolding, not what happened, but what didn't happen. Now, you can only do that when you have a model, because a model says this is the ideal thing. And so now you can measure the shortcoming. And so this model is truly alchemical in its essence, is that it's a twist on empiricism. It's not that you can't be empirical. Yes, you have to be really, really good with your observations, but there's a trick, is that what you see, you use the model to say, what's missing here? And then when I use that model for the convicts I was working with, what's missing was felt futility. This is a problem of adaptation. Suicide is a problem of adaptation. Aggression is a problem of adaptation. Attention problems are a problem of adaptation. And all of a sudden it was like, but when you look at what's missing, and so it came together, and oh my goodness, tinkle started going down my spine over and over and over again. And I thought that, everybody would get this. I thought that everybody did, but I realized that what happened in university is nobody taught the philosophy of science anymore, because they considered it, because everybody just wanted to know, okay, how do we operate on other people? Like, what kind of therapist should I be? What kind of parent? How do I operate on my children? What should I do? And they were doing this, and so philosophy got lost. Nobody was thinking, okay, every science is based upon certain beliefs. And in this way, you could say they're all religions. And you don't realize that unless you understand the philosophy. No, it's based on a philosophical assumption. And if it's based on a philosophical assumption, there's a model that ultimately derives from that. And if there's a model that derives, you have the power to predict. And the power to predict then would say, okay, this is what ideal potential looks like, then what is missing here? And then then you have to replace what is missing for full potential to be realized. So it was a coming together of physics, of chemistry because organic chemistry was my specialty. And so I realized when I realized I'd been an attachment theorist all along because I was basically working with elements. And we called it valence. Valence was their ability to attract. We just called it different words. But as soon as you knew what it was, some were inert, some traded partners at the drop of the hat, some were very stable, some that would be secure attachments, some had secure, some had insecure. So you had all of this stuff. And you had resistance to proximity. You had all of it, so it was all there. So I realized I had always been an attachment theorist. I just didn't know it. So when I realized that the same applies to human relationships, it was just so exciting. But it was just I feel like I've been so fortunate to live out my the live out the queen sciences, so to speak, philosophy, physics, and chemistry, and then bring it to the realm of human relationship. And so that's what I hope is my contribution, so to speak, as a philosopher scientist, that I can. I just wish I was also a poet and a musician, because it turns out that when you see the beauty in the universe, you want to sing it, right? And you want to put it into poetry. And I just feel so hampered by this because you're stuck with prose. And the reason I took science in school is so I didn't have to write, because I was a terrible writer and I didn't want to ever have to write. And so I was really slow with words. So I took science because no essays were required, right? And that's the joke, is that when you see some beauty in the universe, you want to put words to it because it ends up to be very poetic, and you need to use the words, and you want to reach to one's soul, and the only way you can do that to the recesses of the brain is through music. Music is the only way to get past all of this stuff, and so you want to do it through music. So I feel very fortunate and thwarted at the same time that I didn't have that the other the other parts of the expressive parts of this. So I just wanted to see, but I didn't think of, oh, but what if I see? Then I'll want to say what I see. I'll want to express what I see. That was a long answer,
Gordon,
Lena. That was a very
thank you.
long answer.
It was a wonderful answer, and I wanted to say that your what you just said now, and many of your lectures are actually music to my ears. So it's another sort of music.
Yeah, I also wanted to say that it's just like a song. Even now, when I was listening to you, it makes so much sense. And also for me as a psychologist, your theory became something I felt like, yes. Yes, finally, somebody took all the pieces of information and put it together in the way it makes actually sense. I feel it like this, and I can use it as a model to go further, to work with my to parent, and also to work with my clients, not only kids but also adults. And I also wanted to ask you, you often say that your theory is evidence-based. And
Hmm.
at the same time, it's a developmental theory rather than an evidence-based practice.
Hmm.
Could you explain what you mean by that distinction?
Well, evidence-based practice was based upon pharmacology, and it was to guard against snake oil. And so, what you had to do is to be able to uh, like it pharmacology had basically drifted into just the placebo effect. If you say it works, then it works, right? And people believe it, and then it works. And that's true. There is a placebo effect to most things. If people believe it works, it works. That's a funny kind of thing about that. And even in today's psychedelic therapies that are doing it, it's got a 70% placebo effect. And so you begin to question, oh my goodness, what is this about? It's snake oil again. It's that fact. Well, the actual fact, the question was, let's bring this to a science. Let's test it to see if it actually works, right? And so the idea is they had to have outcomes that prove their efficacy. And so does it work? Well, then the learning theory part of which is the dominant paradigm, because it's very clear that behavior is instrumental. That's the assumption that is there, but it doesn't explain all the emotional and instinct-driven behavior. But if it is instrumental, then what I do should be instrumental, should be able to be evaluated in terms of the efficacy of the change in another person. Think of parenting. So if I do this, then it should have prescribed change in a child. But learning theory is also based on the idea of immediacy because it works basically on pigeons, mice, and rats, and there's no long-term memory, right? Or very short. There is a little bit, but not much. But you're working on immediacy and you're working on consistency, that you have to be consistent because these are reinforcement aspects of it. And so you have to be consistent. So the idea is what you do, that is your practice, is it effective? Does it have the predicted change? And that has to be measurable. Now, the problem in that, it's not a relational statement. It's the relational statement is that it's what you do that determines the effect. When you look at it relationally, and you look at all of the research in the 80s on therapists and therapy, it said it wasn't what you do, it's who you are, who the therapist is to the client. It's the relationship was the number one factor in efficacy. That became true in addiction. It's a number one thing in emotional well-being. It comes through like the new Harvard study in terms of it's a relationship, with a caring adult, in the all the longitudinal research. So in other words, it's not what the therapist does. It's not practice. It's relationship. So when you say evidence-based practice, it's an oxymoron. It's a scientific oxymoron. It's not right. Because evidence-based practice says it's what you do that's making the difference, and it's not what you do. So if your assumption is wrong, the whole thing is invalid. In science, we call it, there is a lack of validity in your question. And so serious scientists are throwing out evidence-based practice altogether because it's an oxymoron. It doesn't work. So then we have to go back. If it's about relationship, it's about the invisible. If it's about the invisible, you have to have a model. And so in serious science and physics, they don't do evidence-based practice. They do evidence-based theory. How do you describe gravity and magnetism and fusion and fission? In quantum theory, you have to have a theory, a model. And so then you go back to a model. And that's why in a developmental approach, in any developmental approach, in any hard science approach, you don't have evidence-based practice. You have evidence-based theory. What you do may vary in terms of circumstances and situations, but it's the relationship that is the greatest factor. So when you say evidence-based practice, already you are under the illusion that it's what you do that's more important than the relationship. And so it's faulty by definition. And that's why, again, serious science put no stock in this. It just people think, oh, yes, yes, yes. Oh, that's a good thing, is that, it would be proven as what you do has this effect. Well, sorry, we're not that simple. It doesn't work that way. And any parent knows it, that they take the textbook about, well, if I do this, then it's supposed to have this effect on a child. Well, good luck with that. It will work with one child and not another child on this day, but not another day. And, in this hour and not another hour. And it's just, but it is the stupidest thing because now all governments say, oh, now we have some kind of criteria against snake oil, we can throw our money at this. And so then they say, oh, we're not going to accept this unless it's evidence-based practice. And then you get the worst stuff coming into the places because they're all under this illusion. And so that's why in the attachment-based developmental approach and all approaches that are developmental in nature, they are insight-based. It's what you see that determines what you do. And all attachment-based models are relational-based. It's the relationship which is most important. It's just that for me, you had relational theories that weren't developmental. You had developmental theories that weren't relational. And I put them together because no, attachment is where the relationship is where the conditions are conducive for the development, the unfolding of potential. So the relationship is the womb; it's the context for everything, and so that's why it's just in physics this would be obvious, right? But it's not obvious in today's learning theory way of thinking. Is people think that evidence-based practice is the way to go, and no, it's a great delusion. It's right back to the snake oil days. It's actually believing that it's what you do that makes a difference instead of the relationship, who you are to the person. It's the relationship that is the most significant factor.
Thank you. Thank you. I think my next question is a good continuation to what you just said. So, in your view, why, if you can explain why does, probably I assume that in your view, research needs to be grounded in theory. So
Absolutely.
why and
And
what happens?
interpretation. Yes.
Yeah, and
Both the
what happens
question
when it
and,
doesn't? When there is no
well,
coherent theoretical framework, if you could.
your question determines what you see. And like this is, if you, it's not hard to get evidence-based practice. Anyone can do it. They can say, oh, I need to satisfy these criteria. So is my expressive therapy, now I'll take a choir, those who are part of a choir and those who aren't part of a choir. And now I'll give a test, are there less diagnosis for those who go to a choir than those who don't go to a choir? And sure enough, there's less diagnosis, in terms of that. And sometimes there's serendipitous findings, like they found when they were looking for what are the schools that lead to the least diagnosis of mental illness. I mean, despite the schools that aren't in cities versus rural, I mean, there's all kinds of problems with that because you have to account for are there people who diagnose in the region, right? But if you take this and then the serendipitous finding that, oh, and they didn't even ask this question. They found that it was the school, I'm going on with choirs, the school with choirs that had the least mental health problems, right? Well, first of all, that's great news for those who have always thought that having emotional playgrounds, which includes me, where you have emotions that can play, especially in music, especially in choir, and if you keep them from being outcome activities, this is one of the conditions for emotional health and well-being. So it gives evidence that way. But again, it's fairly easy to do because the bar is so simple. You just have to get around the 5% improvement that they consider is accidental, and you have to go above that, and you get, oh, it's significant. Well, actually, anything you do is going to be significant as long as people realize that you care and they're part of something. They want to make it work. So in actual fact, the placebo effect accounts for much more than that. So it's really, really easy. All you have to do is generate the right hypothesis, and you can go to work and you can create this. So people don't realize, no, this isn't science. This really isn't science. This is just about being able to you could say in English how to hack the system. This is how you hack the science system, right? This is how you hack research, is you're able to get it to your own purposes, and you can get funding and so on. So yes, it is really easy. Uh, the real issue is to interpret it, though, because you have all of these findings and nobody to put it together. Like, you would need to have the thesis. You would need to know, why would choirs be so important in a school? Why would this be so important? Why are these movies around here with this incredible effect? When you have, there's this beautiful movies about the effect of music, or a kid who's on the margins who learns to sing, or the violin, or whatever it is. Why would they have it? Well, you have to have a model. You have to have a model. And if that model includes the ability that the brain needs things that are not instrumental, pardon the pun here, because I'm using music, but are not outcome based, that are just that give the brain a rest from the pursuit of attachment, from the pursuit of outcome. And that is a beautiful thing about, you see, if you have a model that's developmental, you have automatically the idea of what is the essence of life. The essence of life is when rest is truly given, like winter to a plant. How do you know it's living? Because when it's rest, it's renewed. How do you know it's dead? When it doesn't renew. So you've defined life, and the developmental approach always truly is at its core a model that rest is really that which is core to the unfolding of potential. And so then what are you looking for? Well, when is the brain at rest? Well, when it's in the play mode, because then it's not trying to make things work, or it's not trying to pursue proximity. And it turns out that, yes, when they look inside of the brain, at least from a developmental point of view, there are three basic drives. There's the outcome base, so that was a learning theory, and that makes sense. There is the proximity, the togetherness base, that is the drive of attachment and togetherness, and there's play, the play drive. When the brain is in the play drive, restoration happens, all of those kinds of things. So now you have a model to explain why choir would work. But if you don't have that model, you would go, oh, we have to get choirs into our school, and then to make it really work, you give people rewards for being in the choir, and then they get marks for being in the choir, and you've just ruined it all because you don't have the right model. You don't have no ability to interpret, and you would have to have the model. So the fact is the more the more evidence they have, the more screwed up they are if they don't have a model in the first place. And your interpretation is only as good as your model. And so if you don't have the model, the interpretation is so off. So you could have something there, but it requires interpretation. A fact doesn't mean anything. That's what's generated by a study. Now, what does it mean? And that's where you have to have a model. So again, the power to explain a phenomena is absolutely essential. And that's where you go. In psychology, it's got to have a model. And if it doesn't have a model, then you're going to be chaotic in your explanations. And that's going to lead to doing the sometimes the opposite thing that in actual fact it called for. But the idea, this is very ironic, because the sacred thing in learning theory is work. Okay? Because you're working towards an outcome. Everything is based upon work. And that's where it's incredibly paradoxical, beautiful, ironic. In developmental theory, what is sacred is rest. And so then the question becomes, how do you find that rest? How do you enter that rest? How does your brain go into the rest mode? And by that, I don't mean sleep, physical rest, although that's incredibly important too. Our brains need at least 1/3 of their lifetime in sleep, or else they don't function anymore. And so that, again, is incredibly important. But then that leads to all the philosophical issues, like, how do we find rest? How do we give rest to our kids? How do we do this? Well, then it brings to all kinds of other things about how do I dance with my child so they can rest in the love that I have for them and the care that I can have for them? It leads to completely different questions.
Thank you, Gordon. And we will be talking about rest and play and also trying play mode to switch to the play mode during Tamara's workshop when you will be in Prague in less than a month,
Yes,
maybe 2 weeks. So
I
we will
think
be able
so.
to explore the
Yes.
practicalities of all you're talking about, the theoretical background. You will come with a lecture for parents about parents and professionals about how we can take the theory into practice. But
Yes, well, my role in that is to help people think as an attachment and developmentalist, that to find that inside, because I really believe that that it corresponds with natural intuition, that we've been educated out of we have ways of thinking that interfere with it. And so my presentations will be to try and cut through that, to be able to respond to that it corresponds to the natural intuition. So it will feel more like you've come home. When I began to think this way, it felt like I came home to myself, and I was consistent in all my arenas. Yes, I was a theorist, I was a therapist, I was a parent, I was a husband, was a person, but it felt like it was all the same. It wasn't all of these different hats you wear. And so that will be my job, is more or less to speak from the theory with practical implications, with how do we actually live this out. And it is deceptively, saying that word in English, simple. It is deceptively simple, and the trick is to get to the simplicity of it. Because the implications are myriad. They are very complex, but it's deceptively simple at the beginning. And when you think, okay, growth happens, the unfolding of potential happens. I can't even make myself grow up. I can't make my kids grow up. It happens if conditions are conducive. Where are those conditions to be found in relationship? And then what kind of conditions are there? And then when you realize rest, not work, rest, it just is profoundly impacting. It's a paradigm shift. It's a 180-degree difference, like going this way. Oh, okay, we're going this way. And then you see the fruit of it, the results of it in your children and yourself. And it's just absolutely mind-boggling. Really, it is. I would go to say, well, why didn't I see this before? Why, this is so self-evident. Why didn't I see this before? You know, and it just seems like, wow, we've had 400 years of slow, being duped in another way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I am aware of the time. It's actually only half of questions we had with Lina, so we will probably need to invite you again to continue. But maybe people in chat and people who are watching, maybe you have some questions and you want to comment on something, you are welcome to do this. And uh,
We, Xenia, we
yes,
actually
Lina.
have one comment in the
Yes.
chat. Is it okay to read it now?
Okay.
Um, both are fascinating to listen to what you're saying, but also how. What makes you so passionate about this topic, even after exploring it for so many years? I, as a parent of a small child, would need the same passion and curiosity in understanding my child.
Oh.
Mm.
I, I, I think it's I think it's part of getting it. It's just that the passion comes naturally from getting it. I just yes, I I do get tired, or I'm approaching my 80th birthday. I do get tired sometimes and irritable, and I go on more rants than not because I see so much blindness around when there's so much possibility for other things. So yes, I do get frustrated, but I at this point you know it just feels like uh like when you realize that seeing in this way what difference it makes for the children in people's care if they see them this way and if they can dance with their child with this way, I don't know, it just really wants I want to get that message across in whichever way I can, and let people know it doesn't have to be this hard. It really doesn't have to be this hard. It's incredibly fulfilling, and the dance is much easier when you dance from insight and you have an idea of what it is that your child truly needs. And one of the lectures is actually entitled that. What does a child need? What do they truly need? And so that is, I will be addressing it. What do they truly need? And of course, what they need is involved in the relationship, and that's where we can step up. But yes, I am absolutely as enthused about this as when it first of all came through my thick skull. I got through to to sink in. Come on, Neufeld, like this is a game changer. And yes, it is a game changer.
For many of us, Gordon, actually, for many of us, and I always am very excited for new parents who are coming to the paradigm and even professionals. And when I have this honor to invite them into the theory and to see everything you have to say and to hear it and actually to have this lens. And it's interesting how when you truly feel it, you just cannot unsee it. And it's something I say like, be aware that this is the lens that will stick with you because it makes so much
Yes,
sense.
yes, yes. And not you don't have to be a philosopher or be in love with philosophy to be able to get here. Because really, it's just about seeing your child differently. If you have an insight in terms of the relational needs and the role you play in this and the construct of rest, it's just these insights alone can change the dance and make it more fulfilling both ways and more effective both ways. So you don't have to approach it philosophically as we're doing right now. Like, what is the philosophy of science about this? How is this different, and how does this weigh into it? That isn't necessary, and that's a fortunate part. I mean, naturally, I love to teach from there, but I think as you were observing, I don't know before the tape was on, is that I don't talk much about this in my actual courses, and it's true. I don't. I talk on top of this, but this is the basis of this. I talk on top of it because most people are not asking the questions that are philosophical here. I wish they were. I wish they were because
We are.
I'd love to talk about this, I'd love to talk about this because this is if you're at all philosophically minded, and even more if you're a philosopher scientist, this is the stuff that produces tingles down the spine. This is the stuff that goes, oh, I wanted to understand my universe. I think I'm understanding a bit more. This is the stuff that means that the same thing, the same principles that apply for the atom apply for the family and apply in society. And when you split apart the atom, you got the worst destructive energy possible, which allowed the atomic bomb. And now we're splitting, the equivalent of the atom in in society, the family, and we're splitting it in many ways. And we've got this incredible dark energy that is unleashed in our world today, and we can actually just feel it unraveling, in front of us. And oh my goodness, what's going on? And from a science, a philosophy point of view, it seems all related to me. It was the same as the atomic bomb. It's just absolutely related. Is we are splitting where attachment is a delivery system of care. And when we split that through screens and sameness and through to artificial intimacy, and we split it through various things, we split it instead of it being a delivery system of care. Now we are attaching to whom we are most alike, and we think we belong with those that we're like, and it actually creates this huge swirling vortex. Boredom is just escalating, and that's the first line of evidence that something is not working. When boredom increases in a civilization, restlessness is increasing, and this is all evidence based again, that these things are absolutely escalating. And aggression is increasing in our schools, and so on. All of these things indicate that something is awry. And what is awry, is in that we're splitting the atom. We're splitting the family. We're splitting the children from the adults who care for them. And in this is one of the great concerns, and the concerns that I want to address in the lectures as well, in Prague, is why it is that we need to rediscover cascading care, and where children are meant to be, where they belong, and where we belong as grandparents, as parents, where we belong and are meant to find our fulfillment is in cascading care relationships. And that confronts a lot of what is happening in the digital world, but not only that, all over the place, as children start revolving around other things other than those who care for them, and other groups and people.
So
Again,
many
all my
more.
answers are way too long, I know.
No, they are wonderful, and I have so many more though. And we also have some questions in the chat. So maybe as a continuation to what you just said, there is a question about when the relationship is not working and a person feels that they try and try and try, cannot get to the other person. It's like they feel that they're stuck, and it's sort of one-sided, and then they cannot get the relationship work.
Yes.
Uh, what can be done?
Well, the two things that this model would point to. One is, what is attachment for? It's a delivery system of care. So instead of trying to figure out how can I repair the relationship, how can I get him to want to be with me or like me or love me or so on, you get on with being able to convey in any shape, way, form that you care about the other person, you care for them, you are taking care of them. That is powerful because that's a delivery system of care. The other thing in that this model has is a relationship can is has got a dark side to it. When in relationship, we're set up for being hurt. We're hurt by separation. We're hurt by all kinds of messages of not mattering the most, and so on and so on. And so many of us are defended against relationship because it sets us up for separation. So then it doesn't engage so much anymore. And so as somebody isn't seeking that togetherness with us because of the hurt that's down the line. And that's very simple. A child starts saying, I don't care, it doesn't matter, whatever. And now they're even getting out of what they're attached to, never mind who they're attached to. And so then what can be the antidote to this? Well, play is the ultimate engagement. It's its middle name. Play engages us, and not it's not always fun, but when the brain is in the play mode, things are ultimately engaging. So it turns out that when I am the most playful, I am the most attractive, and it conveys safety to whoever it is that is attaching to me. So the answers then are quite simple in their idea, not always easy in practice, but simple in their idea is that the more I deliver care, and don't make a point of it, just deliver your care, right? Find a way of conveying it, and the more you engage when you're in a playful space, try and find the play inside of you, your playfulness, the more likely it is that you will address the impediments in that relationship. Can be all kinds of impediments there that are keeping somebody from pursuing proximity with you, that want togetherness with you, that give you their heart. But these are the two things the model points to as being able to increase the likelihood that you can reduce those impediments and so on. And these things are true whether it's in marriage, in any relationship. If you're going into relationship repair, these will be the two things, the two basically powerful things to deliver care and to find your playfulness in interacting that will be the most likely to dissolve, address, melt the impediments to win the heart, so to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have time for one more question? Are you okay with that? Or do
For
you
me,
need to
yes.
go? Yeah. Okay. There is a personal one. How did you handle your own parenting mistakes?
Well, I had to take up a relationship with my own remorse. I had to take up a relationship with my own guilt. Uh, first of all, I try to avoid it, like most people do, try to run away from it, defend myself, and so on. But that's not the way you come to realize your full potential as a human being, is that this is natural to feel guilty, to feel remorse, and it's okay. That if you fight it, then it impacts you in negative ways. You run away from it, you run away from responsibility. If you invite it to exist in you, this is true, and you have your tears about it, you can live with it. You can live with it, and it doesn't affect your ability to show up, your ability to be present. It's just part of the fabric of society, that this is how we extend grace to ourselves. We don't extend grace to ourselves by saying that it doesn't matter anymore. Yes, it does matter. I wish I would have seen this earlier. I wish I would have been the kind of parent my child needed at that time. Yes, but if I take up a relationship with it and say I'm going to have those thoughts every now and then, when the salt is put on the wound, I'm going to have those thoughts and I'm going to have those feelings, and I will make room for them, and I will have my sadness about this. Then that makes me more human. Then I don't have the hard edge of defendedness. The worst part is to run away from those feelings instead of embrace them. People think, oh, no, 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 I can't have that. Oh, no, no, they aren't the enemy. They aren't the enemy if you make room for them. If you make room for them, then it doesn't take you out of the relationship. Then it doesn't get you into neurotically trying harder just to escape your guilt. Then you can truly be there in the present. So it's paradoxical, but how do you deal with these things? Actually, by making room for them to exist in you, by saying that this is me too. I do have some guilt here. I do have some remorse, and I need to make room for this. Take up a relationship with it and have a few tears about this sadness, and then everything softens, and you realize you don't have to run from life, and you don't have to run from your past life, and you don't have to run from your past mistakes.
Thank you, Gordon. There is so much poetry in your words. I really, it feels like poetry to me because it touches somehow the soul directly. I don't know how you do it.
Mm.
Thank you.
Well, I'm glad you found a little bit of a poet in me. I just constantly wishing for, oh, please, is it too late for to find my muse? I need to find my muse. Yeah.
I often cry when I listen to you. Somehow it really touches my soul too. So thank you. Thank you
Thank you.
uh for your words and
Thanks.
ideas and thoughts.
Our listeners are writing that they're thankful for the deep and insightful thoughts. Yeah, we are thankful. And again, yeah, there are lots of things you're coming up,
Mm,
Gordon, for you.
mm.
And I'm also thankful to you for coming and joining us here today. And I'm very thankful for our wonderful audience who came to support us and to ask those wonderful questions.
Well, thank you for this opportunity to share these things. I don't often get asked these questions. In fact, I seldom get asked these kinds of questions. So you can see I was delighted to be asked these kinds of questions. Now, I, uh, I love to talk about this at this level.
Will you join us again? We
Oh,
have some more.
certainly, certainly,
Okay,
absolutely.
great, amazing. And
Yeah,
we
We can
also,
we have
yeah,
more on this topic, and you can
yes.
also tell us which other topics you would like to talk
yeah.
about, so we could
Well, we
ask you
could
more
talk about so
questions.
many. We could talk about the construct of rest. We could talk about guilt some more. We could talk about adaptation, felt futility, about what is aggression really saying, and how do we recognize it in ourselves, and how do we learn to listen to it?
Yeah.
Wonderful. I wrote it down.
Yeah.
We have topics for the next
Yes.
for our next podcast with you. Um, yeah.
And also so many thank yous for to you in the chat. Thank you very much for the goods that happened to
Mm,
our family following you. So
mm,
grateful to you, Gordon. Thank you. I would love the topic of remorse.
mm.
So
Yes, that's a
Remorse
big
and
one.
guilt.
yes.
It's a big one. Yeah.
Okay, then. So we are thankful to her. We're gonna say goodbye